Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. My topic for tonight is what's happening in Syria and what may happen. I am being joined now by my friend, Dee Pierce,
Hello, everyone.
the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends.
And quite a world we live in right now.
Quite a world we live in, indeed, right now. How are you tonight, Dee?
Alrighty. Yeah, just so much going on. My head was in a spin with everything and different analysis.
Yeah, I know. My head's been spinning too. I can't stop watching videos about this. Right up to the end, or right at the start of the show. I've been watching videos all day, and all day yesterday too, all day Sunday.
Right, and I usually don't take naps in the afternoon. And this afternoon I had to take a nap. My head, I was just so exhausted. And
Yeah, I really wanted to take a nap, but I skipped it tonight. I just didn't have time.
I know there's just so much going on. And you want to catch up on it that I needed a break from it and crazy. Well, last night too, I had one of the dogs that kept getting up during the night. The dog
Um,
sleeps in the room with me and then gets off the bed, then wants to come on the bed a certain way that wakes me up again. So it's just on and off. So,
I think we'll start off. I'm going to start off by making sure I share this.
and that's what I got to do.
Okay. So why don't we do that for just a second or two?
Yes, and this gives people a chance to come in here.
Yes. And then I will start I'll start on the first thing. It's not really an article. It's just a map that I want to show that's from an article
Okay.
because I want, uh, yeah, me neither. I don't usually take naps in the afternoon either. I usually take one actually right after dinner before the shows.
Right, just to refresh up before the show.
Right. But I didn't have time today. So there it is. Uh,
I don't see the map yet, if that's what you're putting it up.
no, well, actually, I'm putting up the article with
Okay.
the map in it. It's from Al Jazeera. The article was about maps. It was illustrating the opposition's battles shown, in 11 maps. But I was most interested in the final map. Uh, I didn't really talk about the battles. What I want to talk about is what a mess Syria is. Okay, it was a mess beforehand, but when you take the trouble to look at a map and you understand the fragmentation in Syria, then you understand what a difficult time the Assads had in keeping Syria together.
Hmm.
So people should be seeing the map right now.
Yes, I see it.
I think they are. And there's a key to the map here as well. The blue inclining towards an aqua there, okay, is an areas being occupied by forces of Turkey and rebels who are aligned, okay, with Turkey. So if you follow my cursor, you'll see the area of Afrin, okay, and also Tal Abyad
Okay.
are areas of Syria occupied by Turkey. Okay, the next big area, the yellow that's not as bright as the small yellow over here, the Manbij area. Okay, that is the area inhabited by the Yazidis, by the Kurds, okay, and by quite a few Christians also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if the Kurds had their way, they would have long ago established an independent state, okay, in this area. The government of Syria has for a long time been trying to prevent that, and the Turks also want to prevent that.
That's not good.
Okay, moving, well, it all depends on where you're sitting. Okay,
Exactly.
you're Kurdish and you're looking for an independent Kurdistan, the fact that the Kurds occupy what looks like maybe 40% of Syria, if we look at the whole map, certainly one third of Syria, uh, from their point of view, that is very good. Now, the province gave Idlib over here, okay, in the light green. That's where the Islamic groups, the extremists, uh, were constrained to before the latest explosion.
Mm-hmm.
They were all
Those.
here, and they had to develop between 15 and 25,000 troops, okay, in there. Okay. Now they expanded from that in an explosion. They went over to Aleppo first, okay, and they conquered that. Scott Ritter has a theory, and it's that what they were trying to do was to explode from there and take control of a highway. I think he said it was the M5 highway. And that's all they were trying to do. But when they found that there was utterly no opposition to what they were doing, they said, okay, let's go further. And they took Aleppo,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where they had a lot of cells of Islamic fighters. So Aleppo fell to them fairly easily, and they found the resistance from the army forces, Syrian army forces, was extremely weak. So since no one was opposing them, they then started to expand. Now it's significant that the Syrian defense forces, I should say the government forces, were concentrated over to the left. They had been largely demobilized because of the problems Syria was having, including, okay, an inability to pay the government forces. In other words, people were making, the soldiers were making sometimes $10 a month, $30 a month, maybe $50 a month. The forces in Idlib, the revolutionary forces of the Islamic extremists, were getting paid in part by Turkey and in part by the United States, and their foot soldiers were getting paid as much as $2,000 a month in order to do what they were doing.
Hmm.
So they had a pretty strong incentive to fight, whereas the wages of the regular Syrian army, while it was 170,000 strong, the wages were so low they were basically on starvation wages, which led them to get involved in a lot of graft. and corruption. Their leaders were always knee deep in that.
Hmm.
But increasingly, the soldiers had to turn to that too, just to support themselves. So that was the situation that you had. So the resistance to the Idlib or extremist forces was very weak, when they came to Aleppo. Then they next followed the highway, approximately where my cursor is going there, though this map doesn't show the highway. And they conquered the important city, okay, of Hama. And again, there was no significant resistance to them. There was some bombing, okay, from Russia, and there was a little bit of Syrian defense, but the Syrian defense was beginning to melt away. So, seeing that the resistance wasn't there at all, the forces of, let's call them the Syrian opposition fighters, uh, they moved then very quickly into the Homs. And you see how close the Homs area is to Damascus. By the way, this red area is also the area where the Russian naval base is located and where the Russian air base is located too. So the Latakia area uh, is right here. That's where the Russian forces were. And that's where the bombings, okay, were conducted. Uh, okay, so the resistance forces went to Homs. They conquered that. Seeing no resistance, they then went on to Damascus. And as they were moving towards Damascus and occupying Damascus, that's when Bashar, um, 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 Assad, decided that he was going to leave. So he took a helicopter into here, and from there he picked up a flight to Russia, where he was granted asylum by Putin, and he and his family are now there. So you see, the extremist forces have expanded into the light green area. Though they were very thinly spread out here, the brunt of their attacking just came in a straight line going down from Aleppo, okay, until they got to Damascus. And when they found no resistance along the way, they occupied Damascus, and they declared themselves as in control of the government. And they appointed an interim prime minister, uh, who was at one point the governor, okay, of Idlib, and who was very sympathetic to them and very close to them. And he's in the process of constituting a government. Okay. Meanwhile, seeing all the disorder, the Israelis who had been in the Golan Heights here have been expanding their control over the Golan Heights. I don't know how far they've gone, but they're expanding their area considerably. I understand the additional part they've taken is 3 times the size of the Gaza Strip. Just to give you some idea, okay, of what's happening there. Okay, there is an ISIL patch here, ISIL or ISIS, or a few ISIL or ISIS little patches here, 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 okay, and there. But we don't know how closely associated they are to the opposition fighters. It's clear the opposition fighters come out of ISIS, okay, and ISIL, but how closely affiliated they still are, we're not too clear on yet, though there's a lot of speculation about that. The white areas seem to be areas where armed forces are not, okay, at this point. Okay, but the point I'm making here is that you can see how fragmented Syria is. Okay, the government forces, the old ones, were confined to here. Whether they're going to join up with the new government or not, I don't know. In the process of the takeover, the government forces, a lot of the government forces, were leaving their weapons behind as they retreated. They're taking off their uniforms and leaving their weapons behind because they were simply refusing to fight. Now, this red area here is also where the Alawites are. The Alawites are the Shia sect that, through the Assad family, had so much influence, okay, in Syria. The Syrian opposition fighters appear to be fundamentalist Sunni Arabs. A lot of them are not from Syria at all. They're from all sorts of other places. And in some of the articles that we're going to go over, we will see the references to how diverse things are in terms of the opposition forces. They're not mainly from Syria, though. So looking at the map again, as I have talked you through it, you see how fragmented things are. There are areas of Turkish control. There are Turkish-led Syrian democratic forces, including the Yazidis and the Christians, okay, and some other minor forces. And we have to add, they are militarized also. I mean, they have weapons and have been getting protected by the Americans, who, in concert with them, are controlling the Syrian oil. And a lot of the funds from the Syrian oil have been going to the Kurds in order to support them and to make perhaps possible a Kurdish state, in this area. So you have the government factions, you have the Sunni Arab factions, you also have the Turkish Arab factions, those aligned, okay, with Turkey. Okay, you also have the Israelis in the south. You have some packets, okay, of ISIL. Syria at this point is extremely fragmented. The family of Assad had been holding them together for a very, very long time. The basis for holding them together, or holding the whole country together, was military force, dictatorship, and also corruption inside of the military, where the top levels of the military were getting very enriched over a period of time. This increasingly made the regime unpopular, especially when so much in Syria, so many people in Syria were subject to suffering, okay, because the economy, as you see, was very fragmented also, and it was subject to sanctions from the West, very serious ones. So the corruption, the sanctions, the fragmentation, into ethnic groups, okay, and into religious groups as well. All that was tearing Syria apart, while the government of Assad was trying to hold them together with an army that was growing less and less capable, because it was more because the people in it were more and more angry at their bosses, and more angry at all the corruption, and more angry at the fact that while the people at the top were getting very rich, they were operating on starvation wages. So that does a lot, of course, to explain why the revolution happened. Maybe I should call it a coup better, why the coup happened. Uh, but the fragmentation and the corruption, which, by the way, is still going on to some degree, uh, also gives you a basis for evaluating what the likelihood is that Syria can come together again. If the people who have taken over the government aren't able to bring people together, and they probably won't be able to bring people together, because the extremists who are leading them don't exactly specialize in bringing people together. What they specialize in is use of extreme force, forced conversions, head choppings, and various activities of that kind. Now, they're swearing they won't be doing that on this occasion, that they're going to behave themselves and they're going to be tolerant, okay, of other people. That remains to be seen, but that by itself is not going to be enough to create a successful country, because the Israelis are coming in from the south and detaching parts, okay, of Syria, and they're also using their air force to destroy all of the military assets that existed in Syria. All of the infrastructure the military was using is currently, over the last 2-3 days, getting bombed out by the Israelis. So it won't be there for anybody else to use. So Syria right now is virtually defenseless. The fact that it is defenseless is very likely to lead to what some people are calling a civil war. I don't know if it's really appropriate to call it a civil war, because civil war is uh, is a term we use, in different parts of nations that have a lot in common begin to fight. But right now, when you look at the map and you look at the splits, in various parts of the country, it looks more like it should never have been a country in the first place. And of course, its borders were drawn by the Europeans after the First World War. And the Europeans created the borders in such a way that they could continue their colonial rule. They didn't want people, to be able to unite. So the nations they created were token nations where lots of different groups and factions were likely to continuously fight for control. And that's been the case in Syria, over some time. So I wanted to bring this to you because I wanted to give you an understanding of how hard it's likely to be to unify Syria once more. And I thought that that would be a good place for us to start out, today. Dee, have you got any comments about that?
Like this, we really, I'm just like, don't even know what to really say. But like when you said that too, with, comes to see how this person is going to rule and all the different areas and the different factions, different people.
Yes, it's going to be very hard. They have only, at this point, the number of troops they used to conquer Damascus and throw the government out were only 25,000 troops. Now,
Hmm.
25,000 troops can't keep under control all those millions of people in all the other parts of Syria with different factions and ethnic groups and religions, all dividing people. And not just single religions, such as Islam.
Hmm.
Yeah, there are a lot, of Islamic peoples, in Syria, but the Alawites and the Shias are very different from the Sunni extremists,
Hmm.
from the regular Sunni Arabs, from the Kurdish people who are not Arabs but who are Sunnis. Uh, there are just many different sects there.
Yes. And before it was, us. What was I going to say? There wasn't religious rule there, so
Yes, it was a secular rule.
yeah, I couldn't think of the word. Yeah, secular. So he's claiming there's going to be secular, but that's a matter of all the different regions and assuring all the different regions understand that it is secular.
Yes, but the question is also, can a secular regime with so many different groups wanting their own areas and their own sense of autonomy, will a secular regime be able to put them all together and to keep them all together?
Hmm. It's it's a tough call. It's just and then this with Israel bombing the hell out of Damascus and bombing, and they've got I mean, it's terrible with that.
Yeah, but what's worse, is Israel bombing all of the military infrastructure,
Exactly.
Okay, so that you can't have a military to keep order, in the country.
Exactly. And then some of the groups, um, if it's true what I was seeing, because you just don't know, but they showed them killing some of the Syrian army folks.
Yes, some of them were killing the Syrian army folks, but I don't think very many of the Syrian army folks were killed.
Hmm.
I mean, I'd be very surprised if the number was in the thousands, because there just wasn't a lot, okay, of fighting.
So we just don't know.
Okay, the
And they're in a bad shape too.
groups are still there, but they're unorganized.
Just right. There's a lot of unorganization, plus the situation with food and you know the area, the areas, because of the U.S. sanctions and all the sanctions, they they don't have the food supply, the money, and just a lot of things, the necessities, and that was just because of U.S. sanctions and all the sanctions that were imposed.
Yes. Okay, so we have Evelina here, Dawn Foster, the Earl K of Lurie. Hi, Earl.
Hi, Earl. Hi, everybody. Good to see everybody.
Okay, Evelina asks, somebody suggested that Syria could unite internally based on its uh, 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 Levant identity, i.e., the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, given the uh, given that Ziobacked Takfiri Wahhabism is defeated. Maybe so, but I'm not sure the Levant identity is a very strong one. I mean, I don't know what kind of loyalty there is, to Syria being a Levant country.
Well, I know, you'd have the old, going way back, the old Christian churches and that group. They all have that old, Levant type of thinking and connection to the land. I don't even know how many are there Jewish people in there or no? Because
Yeah, there are still some Jewish people in Syria. Yeah,
yeah, because I was going to say, because I remember hearing stories, people talking about the Jewish and the Christians, and Muslims getting along and whatever, and there's just this
yeah,
Zionism trying to separate them all, and
yeah. I think they have been getting along in parts of Syria,
yes.
uh, certainly. But I think probably the parts where they're getting along the best in, probably the Kurdish parts.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, because the Kurds have been taking strong steps towards a democratic system,
Mhm.
in their area. Uh, the Rojava area is supposed to be one where the people involved are trying to establish a quite advanced sort of socialist state
Okay.
with a strong thrust, okay, of feminism in it, indeed.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right, and you say that, when you look at the Jewish people and there, I mean, you would say Levant. I mean, you would say they go way back. They are people that you would say that historically, they're part of the region.
Historically, they are part of the region, but would they unite uh, uh, with the Lebanese?
That's a matter of the acceptance of everybody.
It's a matter of the acceptance. It's a matter of people feeling a sense of common identity
Right. That
with other people in that area. And I'm not sure there's a lot of recognition of that.
Right, and those are the groups that should really unite with each other.
Right, and I don't think the people who've taken over Syria at this point uh, are very much committed to that sort of identity.
Hmm.
It seems like they're more committed to Sunni fundamentalism or to a Kurdish national identity, or to an Alawite identity, or to. It seems like there are a lot of other special identities, that are running around, and that the loyalty to Syria doesn't seem to be very strong, to Syria itself. Robert Copeland says, with the revolution in Syria, it makes it a lot harder for Iran to ship weapons to Lebanon. Yes, that's one of the big consequences of the revolution there. Robert Copeland said, Joe Firestone, have you listened to Scott Ritter today as he thinks Turkey wants to take back the city of Aleppo and the city of Hormuz over in Iraq? Okay, I have listened to Scott Ritter today on two different programs, on Jamarl Thomas's program, okay, and also on Nima's program. I must have listened today to maybe 3 hours of Scott Ritter. Okay, but uh, he does think that Turkey wants to take back the city of Aleppo, that they always have thought of that as a part of Turkey. And they've wanted it back for 100 years. It used to be part of Turkey, of course. They've wanted it back for 100 years. But as far as Hormuz in Iraq, I don't think I heard him talk about that. What I heard him talk about was that they're wanting the city of Mosul back, and that maybe they wanted the oil in both Mosul and Kirkuk.
Mm.
And of course, we know that Turkey uh, wants to get rid of the Kurds somehow, as well. They consider the Kurds, an existential threat to Turkey, I think.
Right, they do. They see it as a big eyesore.
Yes, as a big eyesore. And I even think that they would not totally reject the idea, of trying to have another genocidal war. This time, Turkey on the Kurds. Evelyn says, in his analysis, Pan-Arabism is not going to work anymore. That is a nation based on ethnic identity. What would work would be a national identity that could collaborate with external forces based on common interests, i.e., development, etc. Yes, I think that's true. I think that is the way Scott looks at things. So let's go on. We have a number of very interesting things to cover tonight. I'm going to share the screen for a second piece tonight, which is a Syrian post-mortem from none other than Pepe Escobar. I've actually been waiting for this post for days. It's called Syria's Post-Mortem, Terror, Occupation, in Palestine. The NATO, would you like to read this, Dee?
No, you can read it. That's fine. You read it. I know you love Pepe.
But so do you, right?
Oh, I do too, but no, you can read it.
Okay. The NATO-Israeli cabal cheering on Damascus's fall will get more than they bargained for. Power struggles and infighting among extremist militias and civil society, each backed by different regional and foreign actors who want a piece of the pie. And of course, he's dead right about that. He published this today, December 10th, 2024. And there is a lovely graphic. I think at the bottom there's what looks like a Lenin's head, but maybe it's somebody else's head. But anyway, there are Marxist elements somewhere, in the mix here. But I think this is depiction of the different kinds of armed forces, which are taking over Syria right now. But this photo credit is to the cradle itself. The short headline defining the abrupt, swift end of Syria as we knew it would be. Eretz Israel meets the new Ottomanism. The subtitle, a win-win for the West and a lethal blow against the axis of resistance. But the quote, still pervasive American pop culture, perhaps the owls are not what they seem. Okay. Let's start with former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's surrender. The Qatari diplomats, off the record, maintain that Assad tried to negotiate a transfer of power with the armed opposition that had launched a major military offensive in the days prior, starting with Aleppo, and swiftly headed downward toward Homs, aiming for Damascus. That's what was discussed in detail between Russia, Iran, and Turkey behind closed doors in Doha this past weekend, during the last sigh of the moribund, quote, Astana process, unquote, to demilitarize Syria. The transfer of power negotiation failed. Hence, Assad was offered asylum by Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. That explains why both Iran and Russia instantly changed the terminology while still in Doha and began to refer to the legitimate opposition, quote unquote, in a bid to distinguish non-militant reformists from the armed extremists, cutting a swath across the state. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, his body language telling everything about his language, about his anger, literally said, quote, Assad has to negotiate with a legitimate opposition, which is on the UN list. Very important. Lavrov did not mean Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, a Salafi jihadi or rent a jihadi mob financed by the Turkish National Intelligence Organization, MIT, with weapons funded by Qatar and fully supported by NATO and Tel Aviv. What happened after the funeral in Doha was quite murky, suggesting a Western intel remote-controlled coup developing as fast as lightning, complete with the reports of domestic betrayals. The original Astana idea was to keep Damascus safe and to have Ankara manage HTS. Yet Assad had already committed a serious strategic blunder, believing in lofty promises by NATO messaged through his newfound Arab leader friends in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. To his own astonishment, according to Syrian and regional officials, Assad finally realized how fragile his own position was. Having turned down military assistance from his stalwart regional allies, Iran and Hezbollah. believing that his new Arab allies might keep him safe. Now, that was certainly a miscalculation. The Syrian Arab Army, the SAA, was in shambles. After 13 years of war, ruthless U.S. sanctions, logistics were prey to deplorable corruption. Sorry, had to grab some pills. The rot was systemic, but importantly, while many were prepared to fight the foreign-backed terror groups once again, insiders say that Assad never fully deployed his army to counteract the onslaught. I don't think it's only insiders who say that. Anybody observing the situation could tell that. Tehran and Moscow tried everything up to the last minute. In fact, Assad was already in deep trouble since his visit to Moscow on 29th of October that reaped no tangible results. The Damascus establishment thus regarded Russia's insistence that Assad must abandon his previous red lines when it came to negotiating a political settlement as a de facto signal pointing to the end. Turkey, quote, "We have nothing to do with it," unquote. Apart from doing nothing to prevent the increased atrophy and collapse of the SAA, Assad did nothing to rein in Israel, which has been bombing Syria nonstop for years. Until the very last moment, Tehran was willing to help. 2 brigades were ready to get into Syria, but it would take at least 2 weeks to deploy them. The FAR's new agency explained the mechanism in detail, from the Syrian leadership's inexorable lack of motivation to fight the terror brigades to Assad ignoring serious warnings from Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei since June, all the way to 2 months ago, with other Iranian officials warning that HTS and its foreign backers were preparing a blitzkrieg. I don't know if this was exactly a blitzkrieg, but it was rapid. Anyway, according to the Iranians, quote, "After Aleppo fell, it became clear that Assad had no real intentions of staying in power. So we started to engage in diplomatic talks with the opposition and arranged the safe exit of our troops from Syria. If the SAA does not fight, neither will we risk our soldiers' lives." But Russia and the UAE had managed to convince him to step down, so there was nothing we could do. I don't know who that was a quote from. I know it was a quote from somebody in Iran, but it doesn't identify the source of the quote. There's no Russian confirmation they convinced Assad to step down. One just needs to interpret that failed meeting in Moscow on the 29th of November. Yet significantly, there is confirmation before that about Turkey knowing everything about the HTS offensive as far back as 6 months ago. But Ankar's version is predictably murky. HTS told them about it and asked them not to intervene. Also, the Turkish Foreign Ministry spun that President Caliph Recep Tayyip Erdogan tried to warn Assad. No word from Damascus on that. Ankara, on the record, via Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, firmly denies orchestrating or approving the Rent a Jihadi offensive. They may regret this yet, with everyone from Washington to Tel Aviv jumping in to take credit for the fall of Damascus. Only the NATO propaganda machine believes this version, as HTS has been for years, completely supported not only by Turkey, but also covertly by Israel, which was outed for paying salaries to the extremists during the Syrian war, and famously helped rehabilitate Al Qaeda fighters injured in battle. All that leads to the predominant scenario of a carefully calculated CIA MI6 Mossad controlled demolition, complete with a non-stop weaponizing flow, Ukrainian training of Takfiris on the use of FPV kamikaze drones, and Samsonites full of cash bribing high-ranked Syrian officials. New Great Game Reloaded. The Syrian collapse may be a classic case of, quote, extending Russia, unquote, and also Iran when it comes to the oil crucial land bridge that connects it with its allies in the Mediterranean, the Lebanese and Palestinian resistance movements. Not to mention sending a message to China, which for all its lofty, quote, community of a shared future uh, uh, rhetoric, had done absolutely nothing to help in the reconstruction of Syria. On the geoenergy level, there are no more obstacles to the resolution of an epic Pipelinistan saga. And one of the key reasons for the war in Syria, as I analyzed it 9 years ago, building the Qatar-Turkey gas pipeline through Syrian territory to provide Europe with an alternative to Russian gas. Assad had rejected that project, after which Doha helped fund the Syrian war to depose him. There's no evidence that key Persian Gulf states such as Saudi and UAE will gleefully accept Qatar's geoeconomic stardom. If the pipeline is built, for starters, it needs to run through Saudi territory, and Riyadh may no longer be open to that. This burning question connects to a pileup of other questions, including with the Syrian gateway all but gone, how will Hezbollah receive weapon supplies in the future, and how will the Arab world react to Turkey trying to go full neo-Ottoman? Then there's the thorny case of BRICS partner state Turkey directly clashing with top BRICS members, Russia, China, and Iran. Ankar's new turn may even end up causing it to be rejected by BRICS and not granted a favorable trade status by China. While a case can certainly be made that losing Syria may be devastating for Russia and the global majority, hold those horses for now. In the event of losing the port of Tartus that the USSR Russia has run since 1971, alongside the uh, the Maymim air base, and thus being ousted from the eastern part of the Mediterranean, Moscow would have replacing options with different degrees of feasibility. We have Algeria, a BRICS partner, Egypt, a BRICS member, and also Libya, even the Persian Gulf. That, incidentally, could become part of the Russia-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership to be officially signed on the 25th of January in Moscow by Putin and his Iranian counterpart, President Masoud Pezeshkian. It is extremely naive to assume that Moscow was caught by surprise by the staging of an alleged Kursk 2.0, as if all Russian intel assets, bases, satellites, ground intel would not have scrutinized a bunch of Salafi jihadists for months, assembling an army of tens of thousands in greater Idlib, complete with a tank division. So it's quite plausible that what's being played is classic Russia combined with Persian guile. It didn't take long for Tehran and Moscow to do the math on what they would lose, especially in terms of human resources, by falling into the trap of supporting an already enfeebled Assad in yet another bloody, protracted ground war. Still, Tehran offered military support and Moscow air support and negotiation scenarios till the very end. Now, the whole Syrian tragedy, including a possible caliphate of al-Sham, led by reformed minority-hugging jihadist Abu Muhammad al-Julani, falls into the full managing responsibility of the NATO Tel Aviv Ankara combo. They are simply not prepared to navigate the ultra-complex, clannish, embedded in corruption Syrian matrix, not to mention the magma of 37 terror outfits only kept together so far by the tiny glue of ousting Assad. Well, I think this really supplements the map I used well earlier, these statements here. This volcano will certainly explode in their collective faces, potentially in the form of horrendous internal battles that may last at least a few years. Syria's northeast and east are already instantly mired in total anarchy, with a bunch of local tribes bent on keeping their mafioso schemes at all costs, refusing to be controlled by a U.S. Kurd Rojava composite that is largely communist and secular. Some of these tribes are already getting cozy with the Turk-supported Salafi jihadis. Other Arab tribes has this year joined forces with Damascus against both the extremist and Kurdish secessionists. Western Syria may also be anarchy territory, as in Idlib, bloody rivalry between terror and bandit networks, between clans, tribes, ethnic groups, and religious groups regimented by Assad. The panorama even more complex than in Libya under former President Gaddafi. As for the head choppers' supply lines, they will inevitably be stretched, and then it will be easy to cut them off, not only by Iran, for instance, but also by the NATO wing via Turkey/Israel when they turn against the caliphate, as they invariably may if the latter's abuses become too media apparent. No one is able to foresee what will happen to the carcass of Assad dynasty Syria. Millions of refugees may return, especially from Turkey, which Washington has for years tried to prevent to protect its Kurdification project in the north. Kurdification, quote unquote, project in the north. But at the same time, millions will flee, terrified by the prospect of a new caliphate and a renewed civil war. Is there a possible ray of light among such gloom? The leader of the transition government will be Mohammed al-Bashir, who was until recently the prime minister of the so-called Syrian Salvation Government, SSG, and HTS-ruled Idlib. An electrical engineer by training, Bashir added a further degree to his education in 2021. Sharia and law, a further degree in Sharia and law. Losing Syria should not mean losing Palestine. The global majority may be mourning what on the surface looks like a nearly lethal blow against the axis of resistance. Certainly, Scott Ritter today was waxing very lengthily on the subject of the lethal blow against the axis, of resistance. Scott is convinced the axis of resistance is dead. I don't think other commentators are quite so well convinced at this point. Yet there's no way Russia, Iran, Iraq, and even thunderously silent China will let a NATO, Israel, Turkey-backed Salafi jihadi proxy army prevail. Unlike the collective West, they are smarter, tougher, infinitely more patient, and consider the contours of the big picture ahead. It's too early. Sooner or later, they will start rolling to prevent Western backed jihadism from spilling into Beijing, Tehran, and Moscow. Russia Foreign Intel Agency Sluzhba of Vneshny Razvedki, SVR, now has to be monitoring 24/7 what will be the next destination of the large cross heartland Salafi Jihad Brigade in Syria, overwhelmingly Uzbeks, Uyghurs, Tajiks, and a sprinkle of Chechens. There's no question they will be used to, quote, extend, unquote, U.S. think tank land terminology, not only Central Asia, but the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, Israel will be overstretched in the Golan. Yeah, since they're trying to detach a large part of it, they probably will be overstretched. The Americans will temporarily feel safe and secure around the oil fields in which they will keep stealing Syrian oil. These are two ideal latitudes for the start of what would be the first concerted BRICS retaliation against those who are unleashing the first BRICS war. Then there's the ultimate tragedy, Palestine. A massive plot twist took place right inside the venerable Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. The NATO, Israeli, Turk head chopping army is now promising the Palestinians they are coming to liberate Gaza and Jerusalem. Yet until this past Sunday, it was all, quote, we love Israel, unquote. The MC of this PR op designed to fool the Muslim world and the global majority is none other than the Caliph of Al-Sham himself, Giuliani. As it stands, the new regime in Damascus will be, for all practical purposes, backed by those who support and engineer Eretz Israel and the genocide of Palestine. It's already out in the open, coming from Israeli cabinet officials themselves. Tel Aviv ideally would love to expel the population of Gaza and the West Bank to Syria, though Jordan is their preferred destination. So that's why the Israelis are expanding into Syria, so they can export the Palestinians. Oh, this is just so awful. This is the battle to focus on from now on. The late Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah was adamant when he insisted on the deeper meaning of losing Syria, quote, Palestine would be lost, unquote. More than ever, it's up to a global resistance, but not to allow it, okay, says Pepe. I thought that was another brilliant piece by Pepe. I'm glad he's not sure the axis of resistance is totally dead. Well, I guess he doesn't think it is totally dead. I don't think it's totally dead either. We're still hearing nothing about the Iranian retaliation, the promised retaliation, True Promise 3.
Yes. Uh, the skepticism that some saying there is definitely going to be a response, but which I don't agree with, but there's some that are saying that they're thinking that it's going to be when Trump gets in office to see how Trump's going to be. And, where the region is concerned, can they work with Trump?
Yes, I know. I think this is stupid.
I'm just like, that is ridiculous.
Uh, I think it's totally stupid because with Trump, you have to, what you have to do is to confront him with facts that are too big for him, but to ignore. If you don't have any naked facts on your side that speak very loudly, power, he will not be motivated to come to agreement. He, in a similar way to Netanyahu, only wants to come to an agreement when it's heavily weighted in his favor. Or he will seek agreement when it's clear that it's much better to seek agreement than to keep on fighting. So I still believe the best move of the Iranians would be to hit Israel, not with 1,000, but with 2,000 missiles right now. And in coordination with Hezbollah and the Houthis, okay, and the Iraqi resistance, create chaos in Israel, and people will leave. And if they leave, the Zionist dream is dead.
Yes. See, I agree with that because you have to get them now. Now it's even at a weaker point.
Yes. Okay, I agree.
Get them
Uh,
at their weakest point, and this way, I mean, that's the best way for if you want peace in the region, and trying to get the Palestinians. You want we talk about the two-state. We talk about now we see what's going on with Syria, Lebanon. Containing Israel is the big issue.
okay, I think the way you contain Israel, right now, is let them go off with tank divisions, okay, in Syria.
Hmm.
Don't do anything to try to stop that. Just let them run their tank divisions and look absolutely great, okay, in Syria. While that's going on, you hit them with the attack I spoke of at home. You destroy every last one of their air bases.
Hmm.
So their planes either are destroyed on the ground or have no place to land. Uh, and then you offer to talk peace. And you do it now in this month of December before Trump actually comes in.
Hmm. Right. You see their air base is destroyed. I mean, they destroyed Syria's, and they should be destroyed just as well.
And the capability is there for Iran to destroy their air bases. Once you destroy their air bases, they have to stop the bombing of Syria.
Yes.
And they have to stop the bombing of Lebanon. And they have to stop the bombing of Gaza also. They won't have any planes left to do the bombing.
Exactly. And that's exactly what has to be done.
And by the way, if that's done, then the air will be free for the new Su-35s the Iranians just got from Russia.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there's a lot to be said for that particular alternative. Now, Scott has spoken to this in his stuff today. And he thinks that, well, he views the moderates in Iran, okay, as in the ascendant uh, politically now. Pezeshkian as the president, okay, is leading that particular faction. He thinks the conservatives no longer, okay, are in the ascendant, and Pezeshkian wants an opening to the West. Now, that assumes, of course, that with respect to Pezeshkian, that he doesn't care about Palestine.
Mm.
Because if he does create an opening to the West and a negotiation, if they sit around and wait for Trump to come in and then try to negotiate with Trump, not only are they not negotiating from a position of strength, but uh, I don't think Trump is going to respect people who wait around for 2 months before doing what they promised, which is True Promise 3. I think they have to deliver on True Promise 3, or they're going to look very silly. Now, Scott thinks that the moderates think, it's too risky to put that kind of attack on Israel right now. But if the analyses we've seen of the lack of success of the Israeli air attack on Iran are correct, then I don't see any reason for not hitting Israel extremely hard. Right now, based on all we've heard, there was very little damage by the Israeli air attack on October 26th. It's long past time. Okay, just to give a picture of this. Since the move towards a ceasefire in Lebanon, and even before that, after the October 26 attacks, which weren't very successful, I was expecting the West at that time to stop and kind of lick its wounds and wait for the Iranians to come up with True Promise 3. But they didn't do that. What they did instead was they kept on the attack.
Mm-hmm.
They kept on bombing Syria, destroying as much as they could, and they coordinated with the Turks on this latest effort in Syria. And when they got the chance, they pulled the trigger to get rid of Assad. Even though they were in a weak position based on all we know, they did not stop. They realized the power of them taking the initiative and keeping the initiative. Now Scott sees them as having all the initiative, and he doesn't seem to credit, the Iranians, with any initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's because the Iranians have refused to do what they said they were going to do. Anyway, that's my view. I think if they don't do that when they get into a negotiation with Trump after he gets into office, he's going to take them to the cleaners because he's going to have the leverage. He's certainly going to think he has the leverage, so he's going to push very, very hard. His perception will be that they didn't have the guts to retaliate when they said they would do so. And he will take advantage of that kind of exhibition of weakness. Robert Copeland says, with the downfall of Syria puts less focus on what is going on in Gaza and Lebanon, puts the focus on what is going on in Syria. Yes. And by the way, if Iran were to mount this huge attack on Israel right now, it would take a lot of the focus off Syria and put it back on Gaza and Lebanon and Israel. And I should think that's what the Iranians would want to do. Robert Copeland says the president of Turkey, I think, wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire, and the revolution in Syria makes that a lot easier to do. I agree. We've known for a long time that he wants to be the sultan of a renewed Ottoman Empire. It's kind of a running joke.
Mm-hmm.
Evelina says, personally, I think things will get so bad, Assadist nostalgia will take hold, and who knows? Yeah, I think that's possible. Who knows if down the road Assad will return with the help of proven friends. And Evelina says, i.e. Russia, yes, and i.e. Iran too. Evelina says, I get it that Pepe is cynical after the debacle in Syria and the condemnation, but I don't appreciate the condescension. I don't know if I would call it condescension exactly, Evelina. Okay, I think Pepe he's very disturbed, okay, by what happened, and he's a little depressed by what happened. And I think others in the group surrounding the judge are also pretty depressed. I think that Scott, is depressed. I think Scott tends to get depressed when predictions he's made go wrong. He was convinced that Israel was on the cusp of a strategic defeat. He had good reasons to think that. But now he thinks the axis of resistance is dead, completely dead. And Israel has a strategic victory. And he doesn't seem to think that Iran can do anything about it, or that they will do anything about it. Oh, even it said towards Arabs, Syrians in particular. Yeah, maybe so, Evelina. Maybe so. Maybe so. Okay, so there was. Okay, Dr. Joe, maybe it's a man thing with Pepe. Sometimes he rubs me the wrong way for all his brilliant analysis. Laugh out loud. Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I've seen him be, well, okay, I'm not sure he has the man thing. He doesn't strike me as that sort. Anyway, I may be wrong about that. Anyway, the next thing I'm going to present is a video from the judge's program where the judge is interviewing Pepe, and we won't have time to go over the whole thing, but I'm just going to flick around it. Some of it goes over the same area as in the article, so we don't have to listen to the whole thing. But let's sort of.
With its 120 psi power, it can inflate all your tires on a single charge in just minutes in the battery.
Okay. Now let's.
At 800 511 4620, 800 over the weekend.
We were all surprised. The whole planet, the global majority, everybody was surprised how swift it was. So it took us, I would say, between 24 and 48 hours to try to put the pieces back together. And there were some very, very, very serious reasons why it happened so fast. The collapse of the Syrian Arab army, what happened in Doha especially. This was essential. We can say that that meeting in Doha of the, by the time already dead, Astana process was the last sigh of the Astana process, and it came with a bang, because this is when Turkey and Russia, I would say, solidified the notion that this is it. We tried everything, and Syria is now on their own. It was a painful decision for both, but they had tried everything before. And this is one of the things that I was trying to put together since yesterday, in fact.
Tell me about the involvement of Turkey. Did Turkey willingly defy Russia? Does Turkey now stand to triumph over the Kurds? Can you put your head inside of President Erdogan's and figure out what motivates him?
Yes. First of all, what motivates him is conquer Aleppo. In Erdogan's mind, Aleppo is part of the.
So this is a key point that not only Pepe is making, but also Scott Ritter and some of the other commentators as well, that Turkey really wants Aleppo. And that was plain in Pepe's article also.
The Ottoman Empire. So that's it. You remember that Antioch, which is forever Syrian city, is now Antakya. In the past, was reconquered by Turkey. For Erdogan, Aleppo is the same thing. Aleppo should be the new Antakya. It has to be back to Turkey. So that's why MIT, Turkish Intel, they told Assad, look, it's almost ready. There's going to be a sort of blitzkrieg, and it's going to come from greater.
Okay, so we covered that in his article too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's skip, see what else he has to say. A lot of buffering.
So it took only a few days. And of course, when after Aleppo started, even then, the Iranians were trying until the very last minute, they were trying to do something. There were 2 brigades ready to cross Syria, but the Iranians told them.
Okay, 2 brigades, 10,000 people. Okay. So if there had been any kind of Syrian army resistance, if the IRGC was planning to put in 10,000 of the Iranians, that would have had a dramatic impact.
The Syrians, if you need it, no problem. We have the 2 brigades, but it's going to take at least 2 weeks, organize the whole thing, deploy them, and they start and they go to the combat zone. Once again, Assad said no. The question is why? Because he was relying on promises that he received via back channels from NATO as a whole.
Take a look at this strange device that I'm holding in my hand. It's smaller than a quarter, but I believe
Okay, so what he's saying there, it doesn't seem
From
coherent to me.
the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, especially Saudi Arabia and the Emirates.
And what did they promise them? A safe passage home, or the military to resist the rebels?
Exactly. Not military to resist the rebels, but diplomatic support, full diplomatic support of the Arab League, and convinced Turkey, which is something I'm not sure Saudi Arabia and the Emirates will be able to convince Turkey about it, to rein in Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. And Assad bought it. And
Yeah, to me, that was astonishing. I don't know why he bought it.
Who
He
knows?
must have been tired of running Syria. There must have been family problems behind this, because I think it was really a long shot that Turkey would rein in the forces it had called up. That was really a weak reed to lay your hopes on. I think a few years ago that Assad would have trusted much more the tangible military support which the Russians were promising and the Iranians were promising. Uh, Far better to have that military support. At least it gives you far greater control than just the idea that somehow the Saudis would be able to persuade the Turks to come around. So,
Well, I know his wife. I'd have to look it up. I know there was an issue with her health.
obviously, the NATO stand channels in the back.
yeah, his wife has a serious case of cancer, and she's been fighting it for years. And reportedly, he and his wife and family are very, very close.
Yes.
Okay, he's a very good husband. I personally think that he probably figured, look, I've done this for 24 years now. I never intended to do it. My family has health problems. Okay, I need to be there for them. I just don't want to do this anymore.
Right. This wasn't his calling in life. This is not what he chose, what he wanted.
Yes. But he stuck at it for 24 years.
Yes, he did.
He stuck in there for almost as long as his father did. And I think Syria would have split apart long, long ago if he hadn't kept fighting for it. I mean, it would have been gone in 2011 or 2012 if he felt the same way about it then as he feels about it now.
Right.
I think I'm going to skip ahead. To other questions. I think the buffering is too great tonight.
Pretty tired of the whole thing. They lost the will to fight. The soldiers of the Syrian Arab army had lost the will to fight. Don't forget, 4 years after the 2020 freezing of the war, and badly paid with something that we learned this weekend. It was even hard for them to get access to potable water with salaries that were like $5, $7, $10, $15 a month. in Syria. Obviously, no motivation at all.
Tell us
So
about Mr. Jelani, who has a bounty on his head
yes,
issued by the U.S. State Department, whose group has been defined as a terrorist organization.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead some more because we've already heard a lot of stuff about Jelani.
the Syrian Arab army because they refuse their help.
One of
Essentially.
the topics in your piece, Turkey, Terror, Anarchy, and Palestine, terror. Should the people, what kind of a lifestyle should the people of Damascus now expect with this terrorist gang at the head of what passes for a government?
Exactly. And not only the people of Damascus, Judge, but Shiites, Christians, Alawite, Druzes, people from Lebanon, people from Iraq, part of the Syrian diaspora, secular Syrians, either in Damascus and Aleppo, doing business back and forth. Secular Syrians who have connections across the West. We should never forget that there is, for most of the Syrian ruling classes, the myth of Paris here still lingers on in Syria and Lebanon. It's the Mediterranean connection, the Eastern Mediterranean and then the Western Mediterranean coming all the way to the capital of glamour, culture, etc., Paris. There's an enormous Syrian secular diaspora here in Paris. So these people, they cannot afford to live in Syria if there is a caliphate of al-Sham led by Jolani. Very important. This was from yesterday to today. A very important move. Jolani himself designated a guy called Muhammad al-Bashir as the transitional head of government in Damascus. So this guy, for all practical purposes, from now on, he is the transitional Syrian prime minister. And guess where he comes from, Judge? He used to be the administrator of the province of Idlib. And guess who was living in Idlib so far? They still are. All these Salafi jihadis that are part of the HTS gang, plus others, including a bunch of Central Asians from everywhere.
Are you telling me that the people that deposed President Assad will slaughter all who are different, whether they're secular, Christian, Jewish, or of another type of Islam?
Not a slaughter, but life for anyone who does not subscribe to a Salafi jihadi view of Islam and of social relations as a whole. They will be in deep, deep trouble.
Now, how can the United States and Great Britain, after what they preached and attempted to practice with the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq,
Did you know that if you're over 65 and suffer a fall, you have over a 50% chance of dying within a year?
Yeah, my wife is making a face at that because she recently suffered a fall and broke her hip in March, and she's perfectly fine now.
Put in power such monsters who are the antithesis of what the West says it stands for and are the very object that the West said it was attacking in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Exactly. Well, I remember very well, Judge. I was in Afghanistan even before 9/11. And immediately afterwards, and we had encounters with remnants of Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. These guys are not much different, sorry, but they are much more difficult to deal with because they are essentially ISIS. They are former Al Qaeda, classic Al Qaeda, then Al Qaeda in Iraq, then Al Baghdadi gang, which conquered Mosul 10 years ago, then ISIS, and then Jolani, very, very clever. He went for rebranding. He forgot about Al Qaeda, forgot about ISIS, and he rebranded the whole thing as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And that was perfect because now the dividends are extraordinary when you do a PR operation like that. You are interviewed on CNN, and you can tell American audiences and the whole planet that I used to behead people before, but I had a road to Damascus sort of conversion, and now I am a woke, intersectional, tolerant Islamic leader.
I can't imagine him putting it that way, but clearly CNN has been saying that he's a different person.
Exactly.
Tell us about the third prong of your piece this morning, anarchy. Is that what is to be expected throughout Syria? Is it likely to break up into smaller countries that have no connection to the central government?
Absolutely right, Judge. Total balkanization. By the way, at least in one region, which is a very, very large region, from the north to the northeast is already total anarchy. Can you imagine that you have the US supported Kurds, which subscribe to a sort of communist, politically correct, secular ideology, fighting literally tribes, very conservative tribes that live in those areas by the desert, extremely conservative, Islamic, and they hate anything that could smell as a communism for them, which is the case with the Rojava people. And the clashes have already started. So we have the Syrian National Army against the Syrian Democratic Forces, which for most people don't even know what does that mean. SNA, SDF, and all that. Basically, it's NATO against NATO. Because part of NATO supports these communist, independentist Kurds, and the other ones support the local tribes, and they are the Turkish supported terrorists coming in droves as well. So it's already total anarchy in North and Northeast. And this could happen again in the west part of Syria. Because then we're going to have the very intricate network of clans, tribes, families that has been cultivated by the Hafez dynasty for, wow, at least 50, for decades, at least 50 years. When I travel, years ago, when I traveled Syria from north to south, I learned a lot by interacting with them and how complex it is, especially for foreigners. Imagine NATO stand people delving right into this. They won't understand a thing, just like they didn't understand in Afghanistan and they didn't understand in Libya. In Syria, it's even more complex. This tribal, clannish, family, mafioso connections. And they hate interference by anybody. It could be the Assad government, and now the Turkish supported um, technocratic jihadis, and of course, everybody from NATO stand. So it's going to be anarchy all over. Balkanization everywhere. Who profits from balkanization everywhere? Obviously. Okay, I'll give you one name. Israel. It's what they want. They want a totally disintegrated.
Okay, so I think that, okay, is all that I wanted to emphasize again. The expectation, okay, of anarchy. So now let's return to the comments before we get to the. Okay, Evelina points out that Pepe is actually Brazilian. Yes, he is. Yeah, Pepe Escobar. Syria may become what happened in Libya, which is a failed nation. Yes, I agree. My opinion, HTS may be as bad as the Taliban. Last time I checked, I don't think the Taliban were involved in cutting heads. So my expectation is that HTS will be worse than the Taliban. Robert says, for some reason, I am agreeing with a lot of what Pepe and Scott Ritter is saying today. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Robert. I mean, I may be disagreeing with them somewhat on certain things, but I generally find their commentary to be very realistic. Even it says probably an ad to scare you into buying something. I agree with Bonnie. It deserves to be scoffed at. Yes. She agrees with you that that ad that said people over 65 who fall, their chances of dying are 50%. Yeah, I think that's greatly exaggerated. Robert says, for me, agreeing with Pepe and Scott Ritter on anything is very rare. Okay. So, have you anything to add, Dee?
No, I don't really have much to add. I think, we're all pretty much on the same page with this.
Okay. Let's try Larry Johnson now and see if he is on a different page. I think he's on a slightly different page. But let's see where we are in this one. Yeah. Let me get rid of this and bring us back to, what is it? 1448. That's close enough.
Got over $100,000 in the stock market and worried about what lies ahead? How about locking in?
Hey, check this out. So I stopped buying random lotto tickets and started doing this instead. You've probably heard that winning
Israel and the United States, they've got more of a track record of supporting terrorists and engaging in terrorism than they do opposing terrorism. That's the sad fact.
How is Iran harmed by the overthrow of Assad?
Well, Assad, nothing else, it contributes to this image that, okay, Iran's increasingly isolated, which they're not, because of their growing role in BRICS, and they're calculating what to, how to respond to the last Israeli attack. They've held off so far. Candidly, I listened to Scott earlier, and I disagree with him with respect to what Iran's going to do with nuclear weapons. I think Iran will have now drawn the conclusion, based upon what has happened to Syria, that Iran has no alternative but to obtain nuclear weapons. That's the only guarantee a country has that it will not be attacked.
So Scott thought that what would happen, Kay, is Iran would wait for Trump to come into office, and then Trump would do a new deal with them in which they would give up the idea that they would get a nuclear weapon.
They need to have a nuclear weapon.
Right, and Larry disagrees with Scott about that, and Dee and I also think they have to have a nuclear weapon. I mean, if I were them, Kay, I would run to get it, because what Larry's about to say is quite true.
By the United States. Every country that doesn't have nuclear weapons has been attacked. Doesn't matter if you got chemical weapons, but if you got a nuclear weapon, the United States backs away because they don't want to run that risk. I would not be surprised to see Iran make that decision now. They've held off on it because they sort of harbored in the back of their mind, hey, maybe we can cut a deal with the West. Maybe we can make the West like us. And, no, that's not going to happen. They don't understand. The West has fixed itself. The United States, the American people have fixed themselves on this notion that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism. And here's the irony, Judge. I can take you back to the State Department Bureau of Counterterrorism. Look at their statistics. They start reporting for the year 2017. That's the year Hayat Tahrir al-Sham came out. HTS. HTS has been listed in the top 10 terrorist groups in the world since 2017. How about Iran? Not on the list. Not a single group that's on that list is sponsored by Iran. Yet the United States persists with this lie. And the lie is based upon Iranian support to Hezbollah and Hamas. And frankly, what Hezbollah has been doing, they're fighting to recover territory that they believe is theirs.
What does Hezbollah do now?
Well, they're waiting.
Okay, should have added that Hamas, what it is doing now, is exercising its right to resist the occupier. So both Hezbollah and Hamas are justified in what they're doing in fighting Israel. But according to international law, Israel is totally unjustified. Just thought I'd add that.
They're going to see how long, the ceasefire is really not holding. But I do not think Hezbollah is in a situation where they're going to curl up in a fetal position and go away. There are, they like to pretend that there's this great control now over Syria. The smuggling that goes on there goes back centuries. So they're going to be able to get weapons and resupply. They're going to be somewhat isolated initially, but I don't think Iran's going to cut them loose. And at the same time, you've had the Saudis continue to express support for Hezbollah and the people of Palestine in terms of what they're fighting against, in terms of the genocide, the Israeli genocide. So that's why I say this is not going to be a neat, clean wrap up where Hezbollah is going to give up, Hamas is going to surrender, Israel's going to be at peace, and the angels will be singing, birds will be chirping. Not going to happen.
Let's switch gears to Vladimir Putin.
I thought that was a very good piece of commentary by Larry Johnson. Okay, I agree with him too. It is going to be possible for the Iranians to get arms through Syria. I mean, let's be realistic about this. HTS has an army of 25,000 people. How is it going to patrol the whole of Syria to stop a well-armed convoy coming from Iran to get through to Lebanon? It's not going to be able to do that. Of course, really much depends, though, on what Iran does. Everything that people are speculating on depends on what Iran is going to do. If Iran decides to get aggressive and to go forward with the attack I mentioned, then it once again changes the whole complexion of the situation. I mean, if Israel is in chaos, then with the chaos in Syria as well, it will be easy for the Iranians to resupply Hezbollah. I mean, who's going to stop them? So, anyway, I'll get on with it.
The mouth of Sergei Lavrov, warning the U.S. stop sending missiles into the Russian territory.
This is the latest razor developed by Gillette, a super sharp and portable razor. It features German diamond.
Okay, the discussion shifts around to Iran.
What was this
Ukraine.
such a warning given?
Oh yeah.
And what's the U.S. going to do about it?
Well, what happened was.
Sorry, I inadvertently stopped it. But this is a very interesting and good comment from Larry coming.
And we didn't know this at the time. Putin gave that speech. And then apparently we've now learned that General Gerasimov, the head of the Russian military, called Charlie Brown, not the cartoon character, but the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
right,
on November 27th. We don't know what was said in that conversation. All we can do is surmise. So they had the conversation on November 27th. After that date, Ukraine stopped launching ATACMS, Storm Shadows, and Scalps into Russia. Why did they do that?
Why?
What that tells me that on that phone call, Gerasimov told Charlie Brown in no uncertain terms, if there's one more missile, we're going to attack NATO bases, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And I think Charlie Brown is not he's an educated man, and he's not a person of limited intelligence. And I think he said, okay. And the word went forth from there to both CIA and to all the other NATO allies, basically cut this out. This stops right now. Ukraine, you can launch drones. That's fine. But no more missile launches that require U.S. intelligence inputs. And so that's held since, we're coming now, 3 weeks later after that.
Why isn't this on the front page of of the Washington Post.
because U.S. blinked. You know, you got Russia and the U.S. in a stare down contest, and the U.S. blinked. That's it. And the U.S. doesn't want to admit that. But um, so like I said, this unfortunately, so much of our understanding of foreign policy is driven by these media memes. And it was like, as you noted earlier in our conversation, that when CNN interviewed Jelani, the head of the HTS, everyone's going, "Oh, look at that! Isn't that nice? Look at that nice, clean-shaven young man." Well, man, he shaved off his beard, and then this was entirely a staged event. So those staged events are designed to manipulate public opinion. But you can manipulate public opinion all day long. It doesn't change certain realities. And the reality right now with Russia is Russia's winning militarily. Russia's under no pressure whatsoever to change its strategy in Ukraine. It's not going to negotiate with Donald Trump. And Trump can, bellow and holler and threaten all he wants. It's not going to move Russia. And I think, frankly, some of Trump's statements over the weekend were downright foolish. Instead of trying to open, actual doors for true diplomacy, I think he ended up closing them with his bombast and his claims that Russia weakened.
Right. One of the
grow
things
up,
he said,
grow up.
One of the things he said over the weekend, Larry, was Assad collapsed because his benefactor deserted him. That would be Vladimir Putin.
Yeah,
How does that enhance diplomacy with Russia?
Even if that was true, you're correct. That doesn't help, but that's not what happened. But that's how the U.S. wants to believe it. The narrative, we come to indulge ourselves with that kind of fantasy, and ignore coming back to the real central issue of we claim to oppose Islamic terrorism, yet we're now aiding, funding, and abetting it. Okay? And the rest of the world sees our hypocrisy, and they take that into account in figuring out, okay, how are we going to deal with these Americans? And we're an untrustworthy lot. And frankly, when you look at all the different countries we've been involved with trying to overthrow, and currently the efforts to cause unrest in Georgia, and then overturning the election in Romania, we're really it's a level of thuggery that
your former colleagues, and I know you were on the analysis side, not the operations side, are having a field day.
Yeah. But they never think through the consequences. Well, what comes next? I mean, not all of it. I guarantee you, not all of the case officers that are involved with this are blind to the prospects. I mean, I have a really good friend who was at one point in charge of the Iran task force, and when this was pressure under the Bush administration to invade Iran, and he kept saying, "Okay, we do that, then what's next?" And it was like, "Oh, it'll work out." And he said, "Okay, I'm getting out of this," because he knew that it was not going to end well, because nobody's willing to sit down and think through, okay, if we do this, then what's the consequence? Look at what happened. We got rid of Saddam Hussein. We brought in a group initially that had been selected to help run the government. And then in short order, Rumsfeld got rid of them and put in Jerry Bremer, and the whole thing went to hell. Well, we don't even have that now in Syria. What we've got in Syria is a guy that we think somebody controls, but the reality is nobody controls Jelani. Jelani controls Jelani.
This one organ can make a woman's belly big and stick out. And no matter...
Okay, I thought that was a very good set of statements by Larry Johnson to be taken very, very seriously. So those are the things I thought I would cover, but just as I was approaching this show, I ran across an interview that Nima had with Scott Ritter sometime today. I don't know exactly when he did it, but I got to the interview a couple hours before the show. It's a very long interview. It's a 2-hour interview. Okay, it's not something we can go over the whole thing here, but okay, but I am going to play a few things in it for us to wind up. Robert Copeland says, I know nothing about Larry Johnson as I never heard of him. He's a very good common sense commentator. Okay, former CIA member, and he's a member of the Veterans Intelligence Veterans for Peace group, that was organized by Ray McGovern, and he and Ray do a few shows a week for Judging Freedom. Larry has his own channel, okay, as well, and I generally find his comments to be very down to earth and very sensible, as you saw from the piece of from the clip I played. Evelina says, yeah, but it hasn't stopped the U.S. from messing with Russia, who has nuclear weapons. Yes, I know. Hasn't stopped us from gross stupidity. Robert says, Iran may attack HTS now in order to protect their own interest. Maybe so, but I would not bother with HTS actually right now. What I would do is go for Israel first. Okay, because HTS is a relatively small problem, especially if Israel is taken care of first. Robert points out, Neem interviewed Scott Ritter this morning. Thank you, Robert. Okay, so anyway, let's get to a few of Scott's things here. We'll only have time for relatively few comments from Scott. But what was interesting about this video, which I recommend the whole 2 hours, okay, first of all, but Nima was at odds with Scott in this interview, that's very rare. What usually happens in terms of their interviews is he asks questions, Scott answers the questions. Sometimes he embellishes things, but he hardly ever disagrees with Scott. But this time, Scott said some things, which made him disagree. And the big point of disagreement, obviously, is that Scott has come to the conclusion that since the axis of resistance, is now dead, that we have to forget about stopping the genocide in Palestine, because the Arab states themselves will never organize to stop it, and that with the axis of resistance gone, stopping the genocide is not going to get done. So Nima asked quite a few questions pushing on this point. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if the other thing happens? He never really got to the nub of what happens if the Iranians hit Israel with 2,000 missiles, including their hypersonic missiles. What happens then? Scott kind of glossed over that particular possibility, which struck me as very strange, because one of the reasons why Scott thought that Israel was on the point of a strategic defeat before what happened in Syria was because Scott correctly saw the strategic disadvantage that Israel had with respect to hypersonic missiles and the missile capability of Iran in general. And he thought that if the confrontation continued with the axis of resistance, that Israel would suffer a strategic defeat. But now that Syria is out of the axis of resistance, suddenly Scott is no longer talking about the strategic advantages Hezbollah has over Israel and Iran has over Israel, and the Houthis have over Israel. He has stopped talking about the strategic advantages which the axis of resistance has over Israel. He seems to have become a little panicked by the extreme success of the Turkey, Israel, and U.S. operation in Syria to take Syria off the table. But when we think about it, Syria was never very important from the offensive point of view to the resistance to Israel. The main importance of Syria was that it constituted a supply line for getting weapons to Hezbollah. That was its vital importance, but it was never doing anything offensively to Israel during that time. It was more or less a passive actor, simply facilitating logistics. Now, I know logistics are extremely important, but the point is, of course, that there may be other ways to get goods through Syria. There may be other ways to get weapons to Hezbollah. And the strategic advantages in terms of weapons and military capability that the Iranians and Hezbollah had over Israel were not changed by the goings-on in Syria. Only the logistics was changed, and the logistic factor would have a great impact, even if that proved to be that important. It would have a great impact on the immediate situation of warfare. I'm sorry, on the medium-term aspect of warfare and the long-term aspect of warfare with Israel. But when it comes to the here and now and delivering a crippling strike to Israel, the Hezbollah capability and the Iranian capability and the Houthi capability to do that has not been touched by what went on in Syria. I'm sure that Iran and Syria have more than a few weeks to furiously attack Israel from the air. Without Hezbollah experiencing any supply lines problems of note. My information says that Hezbollah still has 150,000 to 200,000 drones, missiles, and rockets to throw at Israel. And Iran's capability to do this is in probably 10 times as much. So even to make an extreme strike of 2,000 missiles from Iran with another, let's say, 750 missiles from the Houthis and Hezbollah combined, that doesn't much stretch their capability at all. But I think it would be enough to drive Israel into chaos. So I think that Scott was shaken by what happened and that he's not being fully rational in his considerations on this. But I did want to play some of this great interview he had, with Nima. So,
etc. And other strategic military assets that Israel doesn't want to fall in the hands of whatever is happening in Syria today. So they're destroying the totality of Syria's the military infrastructure, Scud missile storage facilities, military production facilities, scientific research facilities. This is basically the equivalent of a strategic air campaign being waged against Syria, the goal of which is to eliminate any ability of whatever emerges as the new governing system in Syria to possess strategic capacity similar to that which Assad had.
Do you find it right now? It seems that in southern Lebanon they're advancing as well. What's going on? Are they gonna? They're trying to disconnect the line of equipment from Iran to Hezbollah, and right now in the southern Lebanon, do you find it that the situation is going to escalate, or the situation is different from what we've seen so far?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that Israel, they're not trying to disconnect Lebanon from Iran. They have disconnected, or Lebanon, it has been disconnected. Whether or not Israel, played a major role in it.
Okay, so you see that here he flatly disagrees with Larry Johnson. He just takes it as a given that the supply line was broken. Based on what Larry said, that is not but necessarily true. Okay, and I agree with Larry that it is not necessarily true. I think they can keep the supply line going. It will be more expensive. It will be more difficult. There's no question about it. But there's not that much force in Syria right now to stopping them from getting weapons through to Hezbollah. Second point, I wanted to make is that one good thing that can arise from what Israel is now doing, which is destroying the military capability of Syria, is that it's also destroying the corruption that was attached to that military capability. In other words, the corrupt individuals who were running the military, are now gone, as is the military. If you reconstituted, the military just based on the foot soldiers, and you ignored the officers, then the corruption problem would not originally be there. And you might be able to, to reorganize the military. Of course, you would have to get Israel out of the way first. But one of the advantages of a big Iranian attack on the Israeli air bases and on the settler community at this point is that the air capability of Israel would be done because they wouldn't have any bases to fly from. So they could not stop the reorganization of military capability, inside of Syria. If Russia and Iran were to combine, with an intervention to rebuild the military capability in Syria, if the Iranian attack was successful, there would be nothing that Israel could do about it. So, one good way of getting rid of corruption is getting rid of the people who are practicing it. And it appears that that's what the Israeli attack is now doing.
This was by accident. I know we'll probably get into this, but nobody predicted this. Nobody thought that the Assad regime would collapse like a house of cards. So we can't speak of an Israeli plan. Israel is in reactive mode right now. Things have happened, and Israel is now saying, how can we exploit what has happened to our advantage? This is why we see the Israelis advancing out of the Golan Heights and the Kanatra, and now they're advancing towards Damascus because they want to be able to put pressure on whatever is governing in Damascus to understand that there can be no hostile intent towards Israel. They're also, I think, taking advantage of the fact that Hezbollah is in a state of shock right now. I mean, they literally just lost the umbilical cord of life with Iran. And Hezbollah is uncertain about how much it can press its defenses. And so we may see Israel attempt to find out, what is Hezbollah's new red line. And I think that's what we're seeing, probing in the south to find out, is Hezbollah willing to, draw the line and fight here, make this a fight, or is Hezbollah going to withdraw to a new red line? And I think Israel is trying to feel that out.
Iranians today were talking about that.
So I thought that was a very interesting and very good comment, on Scott's part. So it'll be very interesting to see how Hezbollah responds to Israel's new probing. Of course, the probes are a violation of the ceasefire. So Scott is kind of assuming that Israel will immediately get out of the ceasefire with Hezbollah. But then Hezbollah will be free to launch substantial missile attacks on Israel. I should say combined attacks of missiles, rockets, and drones. Remember, not too long ago, one night, Hezbollah unleashed an attack of something like 500 flying objects towards Israel and created great panic in both Tel Aviv and Haifa. It was a major attack. Hezbollah by itself is very formidable, not even counting, what the Iranians can do.
They're going to provide Hezbollah with weapons. They don't have any sort of problem because they have been prepared for this time and for this sort of problems that they're having right now. What else do they have as an alternative for Hezbollah?
Well, they can't deliver weapons by ground because that no longer exists. They can't deliver by air. Israel has threatened to shoot down Iranian aircraft.
92% of people who have tingling or numbness in hands or feet are missing the warning signs of decaying nerves.
They may have thought that they had an arrangement with Russia where they could land aircraft at the Russian air bases and then deliver.
Okay, so once again, I have to add, if there is a crippling air attack from Hezbollah onto Israel, missile attack, and it destroys those air bases, well then the supply lines will not be vulnerable from the air. The Israelis will no longer be able to stop the resupply from the air. So then stopping the resupply will be up to what Turkey decides to do with the with HTS, and what their capability will be to do that, I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody knows, and I don't know whether Turkey wants to directly contest, with the Iranians about this. As far as I know, even though Turkey has the strongest army, okay, in NATO, uh, Turkey is not a nuclear power. Scott has estimated in the past, has guessed in the past, in some of his episodes, that Iran is not just on the point of having, but probably already has probably 5 or 6, nuclear weapons. Now, he stopped saying that over the last month, but about a month to a month and a half ago, he was frequently saying that. And there's been no reason since then to think that the Iranians did not go ahead and develop 5 to 6 such weapons, especially after the air attack on them on October 26th. So,
for the weapons south. I don't know. First of all, Iran has a plan. Iran never had a plan for the collapse of Bashar al-Assad. Nobody had a plan for the collapse of Bashar al-Assad. Iran may have had a plan for, difficulties in, maybe the Kurds shutting down Abu Kamal on the border, maybe unrest in the Homs area, but nobody had a plan for this. So this is just Iran saying things right now.
okay, I have to disagree with that also, both from the viewpoint of Russia and from the viewpoint of Iran and from the viewpoint of Hezbollah. It was always possible that Syria was going to be undermined by someone. It was the weakest link in the axis of resistance. Somewhere along the line, since the Iranians have proven to be very bright people, they must have thought about what happens if the Assad regime in Syria is overthrown. The Iranians were very aware of American intelligence activities in Syria. You could not miss them. And Turkish intelligence activities in Syria also. So the idea that these would not be successful in, kicking Assad out, you had to consider that a possibility. Once you consider it a possibility, if you don't have the contingency plan ready for it, you're not doing a very good job of planning. So I wouldn't take it as gospel that there was no Iranian plan to handle this.
They would have to supply by sea. I think we're looking at a completely different geopolitical picture. I think we're also looking at a new reality for Hezbollah. When you take Syria out of the equation, Syria has been the long time linchpin between, connecting Lebanon with Iran. They've provided strategic depth, the whole thing, and that's gone. Is Lebanon going to? To resupply Hezbollah by sea, the Iranian ships landed in Syria. Is Lebanon going to allow Iranian ships to now debark in Lebanese ports? Is Israel going to allow that? I think if Iran tries to put ships into Lebanese ports, they get sunk.
Yeah. So again, the weak point in this argument is the same in the earlier arguments. It assumes that there's going to be no change in Israel's military capability vis-a-vis its air force. It assumes there will be no attack from Iran that will be devastating for the Israeli air capability. Now, this assumption, which Scott is obviously making, is in contradiction with his thinking as little as 2 months ago in terms of the Iranian capability to retaliate for October 26th. He was quite clear on that capability then, so why doesn't Iran have that capability now? And why wouldn't they use it? Now, I know Scott doesn't think they'll use it because they think Iran is waiting for Trump. And they think Iran is waiting for Trump because the moderates, specifically Pezeshkian, is now in control of what is going on. But Pezeshkian is not the supreme leader. Supreme leader, okay, is Ali Khamenei. And he's smart enough to notice that the military situation now calls for breaking Israeli air power, because that is what stands between the Iranians and the reconstitution of supply lines to Hezbollah. So the question comes down to, are they willing to take the risk of that kind of air attack, okay, or not? I think in the end we'll find that they are willing to take the risk. And I'm thinking they're not going to wait for Trump to come in. That they are going to do something at least before the end of the year. We will see, okay, if I am right. Anyway, that's all I'm going to play of this interview. But I urge you all to watch the whole thing, because there were a lot of many interesting aspects of it. Scott is really brilliant. He's right on when it comes to most things. I think he's just really distressed and disappointed and depressed by what's happened, okay, in Syria, and that he will come around to seeing new possibilities after he thinks about it for a while, because he's very good at that, and he always does that. But right now, I'm going to end this. I'm going to see if there are any more comments. Okay, Dee, you got any?
I think Iran right now is rethinking everything. They're good thinkers with things, and they're looking at the future and everything else. And I'm thinking like you are. I just can't see them waiting for Trump. I just can't see it.
Yeah, I think they're too smart for that. I think they're too smart for allowing Trump to have the initiative, or the West to have the initiative. They must realize by now that they've lost, the initiative to the West.
Hmm.
That it's time they give the West something to think about.
Exactly.
And I
Give
think they'll
give
probably
what's
come
due.
to that conclusion in collaboration with the Russians as well.
Hmm.
And I don't think the Russians have to do too much. All they have to do is keep shipping the S-400 systems to Iran. And there's no problem with that particular supply line. Okay, if they just keep on doing that and keep on shipping some advisors to Iran, which isn't much of a distraction, from their Ukraine thing, then I think Iran will have its capability to make a very strong attack, uh, enhanced, and I think they're going to try it. But we shall see.
Yes, we shall see.
Robert says Nima thinks Turkey should have done more to help the people in Gaza, okay, in Lebanon. Yes, he does. And I agree with him. I think Turkey should have done more also. But Scott makes the point, okay, in these interviews, okay, or in this interview, that Turkey has to look after the interests of Turkey, and that it doesn't have responsibility, or as great a responsibility to stop the genocide as the Arab nations do. Scott went off on a rant, in that interview about how the Arab nations are, continually aligning with Israel and have never done anything concrete to, stop the genocide, in Gaza. I completely agree with that, but I don't think the issue is necessarily who has more responsibility for helping the Palestinians. All nations that have signed the convention, that have signed the Geneva Convention, have the responsibility to do what they can to stop the genocide. Turkey is a party to that convention. Just because the Turks are not Arabs doesn't mean that they should be ignoring their responsibility in the context of the Geneva Convention. They signed it. Of course, one could point out, well, after all, Turkey is not being any more relentless than the United States in not trying to do something about it. Okay, and that is true. But the fact remains that Turkey does have an obligation under international law to do whatever it can to stop, the genocide in Gaza. And one thing the Turks could have done to stop that, which they're not doing, and which I think is criminal, is they have the power to stop the flow of oil to Israel. A very high percentage of Israeli oil is coming from Azerbaijan through a pipeline that runs through Turkey. And the Turks can certainly stop those shipments of Israel to oil. Had they done so, the war in Gaza would have been over a long time ago. So I think that Turkey does have a great responsibility, even though it's not an Arab nation. It has the capability to stop the genocide, and it refuses to exercise that capability. And by not doing so, it's breaking its agreement under international law. So that's what I think about that. Evelina says, regarding the timing of the plan for Syria, it was said it was supposed to be for March next year, that the planning had been secretly going on for months. Do you know anything about it? Well, I know it was supposed to be planned for March of next year. I had heard that too. I also heard the plan was going forward in Israel over a long period of time. That, they were assembling those 25,000 soldiers for quite a long period of time. And I mean, they were recruiting soldiers all over Asia to come to Idlib. So, yeah, the planning had been secretly going on for months with both Turkish intelligence and the CIA. And why March originally? I don't know why March originally. Maybe they just felt they wouldn't be ready before March. But maybe when they saw the weakness, of the regime, they decided to, move up the date. But even with the weakness there, they were very surprised by just how weak the regime is. Evelina points out that Turkey is NATO. Yes, Turkey is NATO, but it only has one foot in Europe. In other words, the West Europeans, while they've had Turkey and NATO almost from the very beginning, they've never allowed Europe to get into the EU. Turkey has applied for membership in the EU time and time again. And the Western countries will not allow them to become a part of the EU. That's why lately they've gotten so interested in, in BRICS. Yeah, the West Europeans don't particularly care for people of color to become a part of the EU. I mean, what other reason could they have for stopping Turkey from coming in? I think Turkey has now accepted that it's never going to be part of the EU, and it's looking, for alternative economic arrangements, and that's what Russia and China and Iran are offering right now. So, even when it says Turkey can't be trusted, Scott points out in his interview that Turkey was acting in its own interests, and that, like other nations, it can be trusted to act in its own interests. Scott thinks that the Astana agreements were forced on Turkey by Russia, that they were never happy about, those agreements, and they intended to get out of them whenever the opportunity presented itself. So he doesn't look at Turkey as betraying Russia. He just looks at Turkey as following its own interests. In this instance, it has a very strong interest in getting rid of the Kurds. And this was an opportunity that would, make it much easier to get rid of the Kurds. So I think that's the key factor there. So on that note, I think I'm ready to say goodnight. How about you, Dee?
I think so too. I think I'm ready to say goodnight.
Okay. So thank you for coming, and also thank everybody for coming. Okay, attendance was down somewhat tonight. I'm not certain exactly why. The Tuesday night shows have been getting pretty good attendance lately. So I'm not sure why things were down tonight, but hopefully they'll be up again. I'll be back at 8 p.m. on Thursday, and I'll be back again at 9 p.m. on Saturday, if the creeks don't rise. Okay, and if the creeks rise, I might be back sooner than that.
Exactly. That's how it's been.
Yeah, I don't know that the creeks can rise any more than they already have.
No.
But
Let's not test it, right?
Yeah, I suppose if the Iranians do make that retaliatory attack they were promising, that would be an instance of the creeks rising.
Yes, that's for sure.
So we'd certainly have to cover that very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Dee, for coming on board tonight.
Thanks for having me. And Joe has his patreon.com, Joe_Firestone. And buy Joe a coffee. Buy me a coffee, Joe.Firestone.
Yes, it's buymeacoffee.com/Joe.Firestone. Yes. And Dee has a Venmo account and a Cash App as well.
Yes, it's all my name, Dolores Pierce. So, what was I going to say? Yeah, so please share the show out and let everybody know what's going on.
Yeah, share, like, and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed.
Mm-hmm.
And let everybody know let everybody know what's going on.
Exactly, because the Western media, we all know how that goes.
Yes, I know you don't hear any of this stuff in, Western media because they're distorting the news.
Yeah.
And I think we know when and why our free press became not so free.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a subject for another show.
Exactly. Well, good night, Bonnie.
Good night. Okay, good night, Dee, and good night, everybody.
Yes, good night, everybody.
See you later.